Hey, welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Recommend, and let's take a look at the Joyzz or the Joyzz from Krikzz. Now, these are 6-button controllers that are wireless for the Sega Genesis, and they can also be used on things like the Master System. I've also tested it with the Retron 5 and the Super Retro Trio, and it works fine with those consoles as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and unbox this, and the Joyzz, or the Joyzz, I'm going to call them the Joyzz from now on, cost $65 directly from Krikzz site, and of course you have to add your shipping and your tax. So for me it was about $71. Depending on where you live, it may be a little more or a little less, and here's what you get. So here's the controller itself, which actually has a nice look and feel to it. So you can see 6 buttons, you got your start. It's practically a clone of the original Sega 6-button controller. Here's your mode button, where you will have a cable, you have micro USB port, and a lot of people, or at least a few people, are complaining that this D-pad is slightly angled, but as you can see it's not pointing straight up, which could or might not be a problem depending on your point of view. It doesn't really bother me, but I can see how it will bother others, especially if you have some severe OCD. But you kind of have to remember that since you're holding the controller like this, it kind of is straight up for you. So it really depends on your point of view. For example, let's take this Hyperkin controller here, and as you can see, they're the same size, so they're practically identical. I believe you can swap the internals between these two controllers as well if you really want to change that D-pad. But if you look at this D-pad, it's a little more straight. I mean, it's still crooked to me. Let's take a look here actually in person. Yeah, so you can see it's a little more off-center on the Krikzz controller as compared to the Hyperkin controller. But it really depends on your point of view. In terms of the build quality though, this has a nice little bit of heft in comparison to this Hyperkin controller. And I actually like this Hyperkin controller. It controls well. I don't have any issues with it. For 10 bucks that I paid for it, it works well. I have no issues with it. This of course has a little bit more heft to it. The battery life is rated for 150 hours of gameplay. It's RF based, it's not Bluetooth. It's powered by a Nokia battery, so it's something that you can see right here through my clear version of this controller. There is a black one as well, but you can see there's a clear, through a clear case, that there is a Nokia battery in there that you can replace. It has standard screws, as you can see. You can use your screwdriver to open it up. And again, this is 2.4 gigahertz technology, not unlike the old GameCube Wavebird controller, which I find this to be an incredibly responsive and great controller. You know, I've had it since it was released, and I love this thing. Battery life is forever on this. Obviously, the one issue is that this comes with regular AA batteries. You know, you have to use AA batteries, while this you can actually recharge to the micro USB port, which, going back to what it came with, you only get the receiver that comes with it, which is the 2.4 gigahertz wireless receiver. As you can see, you just have the sync cable, the sync button there, and that's put in a micro LED light there to tell you if it's synced, to give you the description of what's going on with your controller. Here's your 9-pin DIN. So this works pretty well though. It feels a little cheap. You can kind of hear it. You can hear it rattle, but generally I haven't had any issues with it. In terms of the fit and finish, I have no problem when I pop it into the Genesis, the Retro Trio, or even the Retron 5, and it works very well. Now, for your $65+ you're not getting a micro USB cable, unfortunately. So you're not getting one of these. Here we go. If I can get it on camera, there you go, guys. Unfortunately, you're not getting one of these cables, which, I mean, everybody should have like 1,000 of these by now, but they're not all made the same way. So you may have a cheap one that may damage, may damage your controller, or just not provide enough power to it, or it might just not be a good controller. So make sure you have a good quality micro USB controller before you plug it into this thing, because you don't want to have any issues. Right now, they're not on sale. There's they're apparently working on a revision to fix this D-pad and get straight D-pads out to those who are requesting them. As per Krikzz, if you look in his forum on his site, you'll see that you can request a replacement D-pad, which I requested it, as well as the rubber pad underneath this D-pad, just to make sure that everything works well. In terms of responsiveness, this thing is great, man. Like, I felt literally no lag. I played on a CRT with both this and the GN6 controller plugged in at the same time, and I tested both of them at the same time, and there is no lag on this thing whatsoever that I could feel. I mean, I've tried everything, and it's great. Build quality is pretty good. I mean, it's not perfect. Obviously, it's a first revision product, so there's going to be room for improvements. I mean, there's a little bit of a creak there, but generally, like, the heft, the weight, the feel is pretty good. It's solid build controller. The buttons all feel great. The only issue I had with mine was that this right direction on my D-pad was a little mushy at first, but it seems to be working better with more use. With a little bit of wear, it seems to have gotten better. I do like the controller so far. In terms of how it compares, I mean, again, it's almost identical to the GN6, and by that extension, most likely the original Sega Genesis 6-button pad. There's one on top of the other, as you can see. They're practically the same. The parts should be interchangeable, at least from what I've seen online. Take that with a grain of salt. I haven't personally tried it, but just from what I've seen. In terms of the actual controller itself, here it is compared to our original Sega Genesis 3-button controller. It's actually a little bit heavier than this one, surprisingly, but like I said, it feels good. It's probably about the same weight as in your hand. It's going to feel pretty close to your PS4 controller, your DualShocks. So I would say I will measure it next to that. Now, in terms of the comparison, there was a wireless controller that was out there for the Genesis before, officially from Sega, which was this one right here, which is based on infrared. Now, infrared needs line of sight. What does that mean? It's like your old TV remote. You had to point the receiver here at another receiver. So you have to plug this ginormous receiver into your Genesis and make sure that this and this were able to see each other. So if you see I press the direction, you may be able to see that. There you go. You can see it on camera. So I'm pressing the button and you can see that it's lighting up. So you need line of sight between these two things have to see each other. And as you can see, this is a lot bigger than this. It's huge. Look at the size of this thing. And honestly, I'm not going to complain too much about this, because for an old line of sight receiver, it actually works pretty well. I mean, the window is pretty big, and I mean, unless I'm doing this or really covering it up, it sees things pretty well. But it's not going to compare to something that's radio frequency. In terms of the size of it, I mean, this thing is humongous. It's a monster compared to this controller. So if you have bigger hands and don't care about line of sight, maybe this old one might do it for you. It also uses, I believe, AAA's from what I remember, and the batteries last a very long time with this, at least a year, if not more. Again, this is rated for 150 hours, but I mean, put them together, I mean, you can see it's a monster. In terms of responsiveness, I mean, as long as you're pointing this at your screen, I mean, it's pretty good. You can actually measure and test both of these controllers or any other controllers through a program that Krikzz provides on his website, which actually you can, if you have an EverDrive, you can use the program and it'll let you test out any controller you plug into it, for responsiveness and what's working, what's not. It's a good program to use. Let's get this back out of the way. In terms of the actual controller, since this is 2.4 gigahertz, you may have to worry about interference with things like maybe microwaves or old cordless phones. But seriously, I mean, who plays their console next to their microwave, or who would put it next to a microwave? And who still has a 900 mega or 2.4 gigahertz phone lying around? Almost nobody. But even with that, and even near this, which is also 2.4 gigahertz, I never felt any interference with what I was playing. Everything worked beautifully. I didn't have any issues. Only issue with this, let's compare it to, let's say, the 8-bit DOE here with its own retro receiver. They don't have a Genesis version or Sega version of this controller whatsoever, but I will give you some positives about both. In terms of this 2.4 gigahertz, it's going to most likely pair a lot quicker and easier than this. This takes a moment to start up even after you've paired it the first time before it connects to the receiver. In terms of responsiveness, a 2.4 gigahertz maybe have a little bit less lag than this Bluetooth controller. It depends. I know for a fact that when you put two of these receivers close to each other, you may have some slight interference. Not sure about these, I don't have any, but from what I saw online, they didn't really have any issue with that. So that's a good point. But there's one major plus for this that you can't get with this. With the 2.4 gigahertz, you're only going to use it with something that has this type of receiver, a 2.4 gigahertz receiver, and that's if it's made for it. With the 8-bit DOE, since it's Bluetooth, you can pair this to pretty much anything with Bluetooth and actually play some games with it. So although it may not be quite as perfectly responsive or as lag-free as this, it's still a very good controller in many ways, and it's a lot more versatile. Battery life, of course, is another advantage of this 2.4 gigahertz controller versus this Bluetooth controller from 8-bit DOE. But again, both are rechargeable and pretty handy. Just wanted to bring that up so you guys will have an idea what you're getting in comparison with a Bluetooth controller versus a 2.4 gigahertz controller. And I'm bringing that up because, of course, Retrobit is going to bring out their own Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn, and Sega Dreamcast controllers that are going to be like this, but they're going to be based on Bluetooth like this. So just wanted to give you a comparison with that. Another thing that it's pretty important is compatibility. How does it work? So I tested it with something like Alien Syndrome. Alien Syndrome is a game for the Master System, and if you have a Genesis and some kind of a power-based converter, what you can do is play original Sega Master System games. Not all Sega Master System games work well with a 3-button or 6-button controller. So Krikzz, what he did was he took there's a mode on this. If I remember correctly, it was mode start in C, if I remember correctly, but you can check on his website, it'll give you the instructions. But once you press a certain button combination, this will turn into a Master System controller, a 2-button Master System controller, and it will make games like this compatible. So when I first plugged this in and played this game, I had it in regular 6-button Genesis mode, and in 6-button and 3-button modes, of course I couldn't play this. The character just goes to the left pretty much forever. You can't control him. As soon as I switched to 2 buttons, of course the game worked just fine. So that is a great little thing about this controller. You can switch it in terms of compatibility to mimic a 2-button controller. You can also do this with games like, well, unfortunately I don't have it, but you have Golden Axe 2 for the Sega Genesis. It's a game that doesn't like 6-button controllers. It expects a 3-button controller. You can change this also to 3-button mode and play Golden Axe 2 just fine. So I tested that out and it was great. So just to give you guys a little bit of in case nobody else brought it up in their reviews, just wanted to give that to you guys. So games that are 2 buttons for the Sega Master System and 3 buttons only for the Genesis work just fine with this controller if you turn on the appropriate mode for them. So just wanted to give you guys that ahead of time. Trying to think if there's anything else that I'm forgetting. Like I say, you can't really get the controller right now. I believe they're revising it, at least from what Krikzz has said. He's working with his manufacturer to work out any little kinks. But generally, I'm happy with the controller. For $65, if you're a hardcore retro gamer and you can find one for that price, I mean, there's not a whole lot of options right now. You know, like I said, I showed you the infrared. There's a Bluetooth coming soon. Let's just pretend that's a Genesis controller. But you don't have too much of an option. This is the best option when it's available until Retrobit comes out with theirs, which hopefully I'll be able to review at some point. In terms of $65, I would recommend it, but wait for the second revision to come out. Honestly, just wait out the first revision, like I have, unless you really want it that badly right now. Wait for the second revision, let Krikzz work out the slight manufacturing defects, and until that happens, once that happens, I wholeheartedly recommend it. Recommend it. Honestly, in terms of the responsiveness, it feels great. I had no issues with it. Played Contra with it, which is always a test. All the directions work great. The buttons feel good. Like, they have nice, perfect travel. They're responsive. Again, this was the only issue I had was right being mushy, and that seems to have worn in just very nicely. The crooked D-pad depends on your preference. Again, like I said, since you hold the controller like this, it doesn't feel like it's really, like it's really crooked, but some may prefer it, the regular way. So you can either take this apart and replace the D-pad and put it into this and fix it, but for $65, I really don't think you should have to do things like that. It depends on your own preferences and your own expectations for your money. I can't make that judgment for you, but you can switch to D-pads for what I've seen online. I don't think it's a big issue, but if it is for you, either A, replace it, or B, just wait for the revised version to come out. For $65 plus shipping, again, $71 for me though. I recommend that you wait for the second revision, and after that, it's a great controller. You can play around with it, and definitely give it a try when that happens. Until next time, this is Recommend. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to rate and subscribe if you like what I'm doing here, and I'll see you guys next time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified when I upload new content. Feel free to leave a comment below, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram under Recommend. Have a great day, and see you in the next video.